there was an interesting question in the community tab. If you don't know, there's this new feature YouTube rolled out where basically there's a community tab, so subscribers to my channel can themselves post in this section of my YouTube channel. And there's this interesting question from Nicole who asks, here is a hypothetical question. Let's suppose Tyler said, okay, I'm going to sit down with some avid fans who have been invested in the story of mine. I'll tell you everything you want to know about the lore. Would you do this? Would you sit down with Tyler and pick his brain and find out exactly what's going on in the lore, according to him, as someone who wrote it? What do you guys think? Is this something you would be interested in doing? So my personal opinion here, I would decline this invitation. Now, that's not to say that I wouldn't love to sit down and have a chat with Tyler Joseph about, a lot of different stuff. There's certainly a strong temptation to be like, what actually is going on here? And in fairness, I might ask one or two very specific questions. Not like, can you just explain everything as an overarching thing, but like right here, what happened? I don't know. How did the Neds get the antlers that they gave to Clancy? What's the history there? What were you imagining with the Neds being on the island of Voltsoy? What's their backstory? Things like that. Mostly things that would kind of add to the world building rather than explain particular lore elements and really key central questions to the story, I suppose. The lore is up to interpretation, and just like a lot of their music is, I mean, this is a hypothetical for a reason. I don't think they would ever do this, even if it was something that could be logistically managed. The lore is hypothetical, or is up to interpretation, and the music is up to interpretation for a reason. And I think it would be odd to actually have the answers to a lot of these things. But again, like I said, there is an element in which I would love to know a bit more about the details of this world that they've built, which is why something like a lore documentary or a documentary explaining how they created this world and the story and all the music videos isn't something that necessarily appeals to me, but something like an expanded edition of the end credits drawings that we got on City Walls that I did a deep dive into like a month ago. That would be really cool to see. Just more of their drawings. It doesn't have to be actual explanations, but more about kind of the world building that went into all of this. So I don't know. I did think it was an interesting question and an interesting thing to consider because, I mean, I spend a lot of time thinking about the lore. I spend a lot of time talking about the lore. I mean, I have a lot of unanswered questions, and there's a sense where there's a temptation to just be like, well, what is the answer? I want to know. What if they made a book of all the concept drawings? Yeah, Riley, that would be really cool. That kind of stuff. They did a coffee table book for Blurry Face for the 10th anniversary. I think it would be really cool if they did a coffee table book like that, where it's all the concept drawings and behind the scenes things like that. Storyboards for music videos. That would be a really cool thing to see. So line at the start of Redecorate that says, there was a wonderful structure to the city that put my characters to rest. Do you think this implies the bishops might be able to manipulate emotions? It depends what you mean by that. Are they directly able to, from their tower, just kind of zap into you and control your emotions, through some magic? Probably not. I would say no. But the way they set up the system of vialism and everything about the practices within dema and the structure of the city, of course it's set up to manipulate your emotions. That's the whole point, right? The point of the city walls that are looming so large that you don't see the sun very often, you can't see the landscape and wilderness of Trench outside. You think this round city is all there is, and all you'll ever know. And then also this whole idea of describing the sacrifices to vialism as the glorious gone, right? Upholding this dark and sinister practice as glorious. They're definitely manipulating emotions in ways like that. A lot of that first letter, which I believe that is a quote from Clancy, talks about how because dema is all he's ever known, it's home to him. And of course, home is where you should feel these positive emotions associated with what you consider to be your home or your homeland and things like that. I mean, a main theme of that, at the beginning of the story, at the beginning of those letters, is trying to break away from, what you are used to. Is the wilderness of Trench actually better than what you are familiar with already? Is Clancy just an X in the world? What do you mean? I mean, can you put anyone in as Clancy? I would argue no. My interpretation is that it's the same person going through the cycle time and again, and that explains a lot about the story in my mind. It's not an invalid theory to think that Clancy is a title that multiple people are filling, but I think the problem with that is that if that is the case, then this Clancy that we've been following for the Trench saga, at least the visual side of it, the Clancy portrayed in the music videos by Tyler Joseph, lost in City Walls, and there is no hope for him. He has lost, and a new person's going to come and take on Clancy's mantle, but this Clancy is gone, and he has lost to himself, and there is no hope. Right? And so I don't really like that ending. I don't think what we see in Dragpath aligns with that ending either, and I don't think what we hear in Intentions aligns with that either. This is very much presented as the same person going through this story again and again. And maybe there is a sense in which Clancy is a symbol, and maybe other people also adopt that, but the same, at least to this person, is going to start again and try again. And the Torchbearer is going to go and find him and help him through another time. And I think, you know, as I've talked about, I think we do see him win. It's just, it takes some work to pull that victorious ending out of the music videos and so on that we've been given. So hopefully that answers your question in a somewhat brief sense. What do you think about Josh Dunn's red eyeliner? Do you think it's representative of the cycle starting again? Yeah, I mean, Breach had a lot of blurry face imagery and themes to it, right? And so in a lot of ways, that album was supposed to be about the cycle starting again. And a lot of the imagery that we saw was all supposed to be about the imagery starting again. So yeah, so short answer, yes, I do think so. What specifically about the eyeshadow, besides the fact that it's a callback to blurry face, I'm not sure. But short answer, yeah, I do think so. I think the inverted lenses further desaturate the world. I'm wondering if that's a reference to depression. Maybe the rose-colored lenses are a reference to toxic positivity. The rose-colored lenses certainly are a reference to that, yes. I mean, they present the world around you as nothing but positive, right? And so they present you with a false reality that has all its pain and tragedy stripped away from it, and, you know, presents that as a really good thing, because there's no pain, there's no tragedy, there's no suffering or sadness here. It's just this rose-colored view, this optimistic, happy reality. But of course, it's not real. And so there's an emptiness and a lack of life within it that's very oppressive. There's a line in Truce that says, "I hope I'm not my only friend." Do you think it connects to how he says his only friend is hope? Oh, that's good, Dragon 21. Yeah, I'd never connected those. That's an interesting play on words. I mean, I think certainly in Vessel, we don't have the idea of Torchbearer. And throughout most of Blurry Face, we don't really see that lyrically, but we do at the end of the Blurry Face cycle with Heavy Dirty Soul. And certainly in Truce, like, Josh isn't in that video or anything like that either. So there could be a kind of contrast to present there in Truce, where he's saying, "I hope I'm not my only friend," to the end of the story with Intentions, where we have him saying he's going to start over all over again. But right before that song starts playing in the music video for City Walls, we have the Torchbearer saying, "I'm never going to give up on him." Right, so he has this friend. And you could maybe make an argument that metaphorically the Torchbearer represents hope in the story, in a sense. And so that could relate to Semi-Automatic. I don't know. Those are just some initial thoughts, but those are some good connections. I hadn't thought of that.